Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is the first campaign diary for Dragons of Icespire Peak. And boy, what I tell you, a huge change for all of us at the table, especially for me, who's been DMing a very kind of high-level campaign, and for everybody else who's been playing in a very high-level campaign, to come back to the table and go back from level 10 to 12, where we were when we last left off the Tyranny of Dragons saga, all the way down to, level 1. It was a major change, including for myself and how to balance things out. But we had a great time, I think, in the opening moments of Dragon of Icespire Peak. We played for about 3.5, maybe 4 hours, a little bit less than what we do for Tyranny of Dragons. We actually did the introduction and we moved into Fandolin, and we only had one major encounter, one that I created, and we'll get into that, but one major encounter out of all the first 3 quests that were available in that kind of first round or first chapter. I don't know how you call this thing, because this book is not broken down into chapters. It's just like sequence 1 and sequence 2, and it goes on and on and on and on. But anyway, here's how we started the evening for Dragons of Icespire Peak. First of all, I had a Google slide set up. I've talked about this in the Dragons of Icespire Peak DM Facebook group. If you haven't found that, go ahead and search it and join it. A lot of people in there offering great ideas. But I did a Google slide, which kind of is the backbone of the evening. So we start out with hero introductions, which I do at the table. I don't let people go too far into the backstories, because I feel like that's the kind of stuff you really want to have come out in role play, not just told to you at the table. So we just introduced who we were, character and class, stuff like that. Then we moved to this. Let me give you a quick shot here. This is the D&D bonus fun table. Another video that I have on my website, my YouTube channel that I talked about. This is a fun little perk system I give people, and I've learned a lot running Tyranny of Dragons, so I pulled back on a lot of powers and different things, and try to keep things unique but fun, but things that probably wouldn't last very long as the characters level up throughout the campaign. So I wanted to make sure we were keeping an eye on balance. After the D&D fun table, which I had some music from this little album right here called Boom Blocks, it was a lot of fun, we moved to the next thing. Tusks and Thunder, a radio drama cinematic that I created. I do this for all my campaigns. You can see a playlist here on SoundCloud that go for Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat, but I did this here. As a matter of fact, I have a small little video series about how I kind of put it all together and how I get some of my ideas. But feel free to use it. Spoiler free, should work great for your campaign if you want to. But we did the Tusks and Thunder, and then I segued into I don't know how to describe this. Another narrative piece, a montage piece set to music, as the characters were leaving Neverwinter and going to Fandolin, and they were going on a cart full of gnomes who were bringing a bunch of cargo to Fandolin, like metals and wood, timber, spices, flour, things like that, to help this civilization get back on its feet. And so I played this, a little song from a popular franchise, not as popular anymore, but it's still a lot of fun to play, the Stronghold franchise. I stole the music. I think it's called Hog Farmer, The Life of a Hog Farmer. And it was a lot of fun to do. I kind of went along with the music and described things and how things were going, and the gnomes, how they were loading up this cargo and how the players were interacting with them. I mean, look, I grew up in the 80s. The montage sequence I kind of throw in every once in a while when it comes to some of my campaigns. They're kind of fun to do, especially set to music. But I had them all kind of just, playing the banjos and the little spoons, just going along with this music as it described their travels from Neverwinter into Fandolin. So it was actually a lot of fun. I wanted things to be kind of lighthearted. We just came off a very dark, adventure, which is Tyranny of Dragons, and it was time to kind of turn down the darkness, and kind of bring it back down to a normal, neutral level where the world and all its citizens were not at stake. So that was a lot of fun. Now here's one thing I changed up. I wanted to do some kind of a surprise moment. Now I threw in an encounter here. You're not going to find it in the book if you're running it by the book. This was a small goblin encounter. I'll go ahead and put the map up here. You can see I had very, very small group of goblins that ambushed them on the Tribord Trail. And I wanted this to be a surprise. Like, no one's going to see it coming. I'm not going to start any music, which I tend to use music very sparingly, but I didn't want to set anything up. So I usually use a lot of ambient effects that surround my players, with all the speakers in here. I know you can't see them, but there's speakers everywhere that surround my players. And I had this very simple ambient effect going with a horse and cart and the sound of the forest, right? So it just sounded like you're on a cart with a horse and you're in a forest. Very, very easy stuff, right? And it ran for somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes. And it was just, I used that time to role play. I was these 2 gnomes here. I'll put them up somewhere. Their names are absolutely ridiculous. I think that's why I like doing the gnomes. But, we were just having tea and talking about Fandolin and all these kinds of things. And then suddenly I played this. Now, that was the sound of the horses being impaled, by 12 to 15 foot spears that came up through the road and just impaled the horses, killed one of them and maimed the other. And it was a trap set by the goblins, a very advanced trap. Now, earlier this year on my Facebook page, I talked about how I was influenced by this film here. I think it's 5 Elements Ninja. It was a movie on Netflix. It still might be there. Go check it out. And they had these interesting encounters between all these ninjas. I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. And so I remember posting on my Facebook page, hey, I just saw this really weird but cool movie, and there's some great things here that I'm going to steal. And steal I did. And the characters, 4 months later, real time, run into this very trap. Now in the movie, it's ninjas under this layer of dirt. You know, they're kind of shoving these spikes up. It's actually pretty vicious. It's actually really clever and crazy fight sequence. But I decided to nix all that. I was going to have goblins underneath it, but I decided to nix all that. Well, they had this round, and I think everybody got hit but maybe one person. Not life-threatening, but just a few hits is enough at level 1 to knock you on your butt really, really quick. Now, these goblins are a little more advanced. They were wearing more shamanistic kind of vestments and a little bit more advanced armor. All of them had gold coins that were actually minted by humans, so that was a little unusual. They had necklaces. Well, they're not sure what they are exactly just yet, but someone in Fandolin let them know that those necklaces, the symbol on the necklaces, belong to some kind of witch that's hanging around the woods causing problems. They also encountered 2 enchanted items, a skull that was made out of just human skull but had like a metal facade on it, almost stone-like, I want to say, almost stone-like, and had glowing eyes, and the goblins tossed that up, and it floated around the combat area, and it basically was just an enchantment. All it did was say, in common, give up your goods and surrender or you'll be destroyed. That's all it was. There's nothing else to it. It's not a weapon or anything like that. It was just this little clever thing the goblins can use because they couldn't speak common to make these travelers know, look, give up, walk away, and you'll live. But of course, that didn't happen. And then also they used a small little enchantment item, some kind of orb that they threw up, and with a command word, it shot out 2 little lightning bolts or arrow bolts at 2 creatures on the battlefield you choose. And right now they have all these items, they just don't know how to use them because they're locked down by magic spells and enchantments and command words that nobody knows, but they have these artifacts. But the gnomes were pretty clear on this, that this is the first time this has ever happened. And the Triboar Trail usually is pretty safe. So this was quite alarming for them to run into. So they journey from the Triboar Trail, they come into Fandolin, and there's when kind of the sandbox starts to open up. We start to meet all the people. I changed a few things. I've added a few characters like old Carson, the sheriff, and his, I guess, deputies that are with him. And I've added a blacksmith called Mangai. He's there as well, but he only does hammer and tongs and well, that's what he uses. That's not what he makes. But he's there to fix mining equipment. He's not like an armorer who's going to be making tons of weapons and have plate mail, right? So it's a very low key kind of thing. I'll put a little slide up here. You can see all the different characters that I've added or taken away. A lot of these images I found on Pinterest. But we spent some time there, and the characters met up with what's the town master's name? Wester or something like that. They met with him, and they kind of laid out pretty much what was going on, a little bit of history and back and forth, and they relayed the trap set by the goblins and whatnot. And so old Carson's going to go down the Triboar Trail and figure out where that is and dismantle that trap, and told them a little bit about the problems they're having with a witch called Marigold, who's out there and seems like she's aligned herself with goblins, which is a little alarming. But look, Fandolin's got a lot of problems, right? This is just one of those things. So they spent some time kind of talking about the problems they were facing in Fandolin, and I presented them, of course, with those first 3 quests. Now, I am skipping over a lot of roleplay. We had a lot of roleplay moments with people going into stores. They did go to the Shrine of Luck. I can't remember the name of the god, Lytharan or Lysol or something like that. They went there and talked to her. I didn't have the lady in charge there gone. She was actually on the premise. And I think in that slide there, you can see a gnome architect that I added to Fandolin because it is a city that's up and coming. Or I guess not a town, not a city. So it has a gnome on hand who's actually helping out and helping the design of things. And there were some altercations there with some of the town folk, but most likely, most of the interactions were fine. There wasn't really anything too alarming, but they got to start to know the layout a little bit and meet some people before they went and talked to the town master about what exactly was going on. So what I decided to do was the town master said, look, I've got these major things right now on my plate. And I described them very, very briefly, but I really wanted to use the cards and the things that came with this system. You know, like I just kind of felt like that was important. I wanted to try it out, not necessarily how I would do things, but I felt like as I was sitting there as Westmeister or whatever it is, Worcester, what's that cheese called? Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire, the town master, and I was sitting here trying to explain the situations that were going on. I was like, Mike, why don't you just use the cards? You have the cards. So I kind of handed out the cards. That helped the players, I think, make a decision on which direction they wanted to go instead of me having to repeat the information over and over and over again. So if you're thinking about not using the cards, I would highly recommend that you do. It just kind of makes things a little bit more easier for the players to digest and help them make a decision. So they have all 3 cards, and where do they go? Well, the last place I actually thought they would go, which was Umbrage Hill. Now, I changed Umbrage Hill a little bit. I've seen enough videos and seen how people play it, and I kind of just wanted to go a different direction. Not too crazy. Again, I'm trying to stay pretty close to how this stuff is presented, but with my own little flares thrown in. So they prepped themselves, I guessed, maybe half a day's walk. You know, I haven't seen any length of time or measurement of how big these squares are. Maybe I'm missing it somewhere. I'm sure I can Google it and find it. But we estimated about 12 to 15 hours to get from Fandolin to Umbrage, like something, or one of those locations now. I can't remember. But just, you know, it was going to be a little bit of travel to get there. So they stayed one night in Fandolin, restocked on their items, and then headed out. Matter of fact, they didn't want to go to Dwarven Excavation. They kind of assumed maybe those dwarves were dead. It's kind of funny to hear that on the other side of the screen. I was like, well, what makes you think that? Like that's interesting. Not wrong. It's just interesting. But they didn't decide to do that. And the gnomen guards sounded interesting because I do have a gnome in the party. But they decided to do what they felt like was probably the simplest task, which was the most, I think, you know, definitely common sense to go in this direction to Umbrage Hill and get this lady and bring her back because of the dragon. And plus, she also has access to healing potions. So they went there, and we put the map up here. This is how I changed it. I made this in Dungeon Draft and took it into a software package that's kind of a knockoff of Photoshop. It's called Affinity Photo, and I added my own lighting and different things like that. But they came here, and instead of having the Manticore just running around this thing and attacking the mill, and she's just inside screaming, this is where I deviated. I changed this, and what I decided to do instead was the attack already happened. And they come to the front of the house, knock on it. There's nothing. There's no answer. And then they eventually kind of open the doors and they see inside that things are a wreck. And the Manticore had attacked from the rear of the house, just destroyed the walls, grabbed the lady, which I can't think of her name now, and dragged her back to its lair, right? So the attack has already happened. They went and investigated, and they ended up following the Manticore's footsteps through the forest and to a cave. Let me go ahead and put this map up. And here was the encounter of the night. Like, there was no fighting here. They had one fight at the beginning of the adventure. That was really about it. And I had no clue how this was going to go. I had run it the scenario about 2 or 3 different times in my head of how I thought it might go or what I might end up doing. But they did some stealth checks all the way down the cavern. Again, this map, again, was same process. Created in Dungeon Draft. It's a program that's still in early access. Creating Dungeon Draft, went in Affinity Photo, added my own lighting and different things like that. And value and shadow, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. And so they went down there. They were using stealth checks as a group, going down further and further and further. Only one person had dark vision. Luckily, they had a lantern. So they're going down, and they find the lady in the cavern. She's all shaken up, and they go to rescue her. They're trying to get her out of there, being very, very quiet. And at one point, they fail their stealth check. And I think some of them were anticipating the Manticore coming from the entrance, you know, down the cave and kind of cornering them. Well, actually, they didn't know it, but the Manticore was actually in the cave off to the side, in the darkness, and was wounded. Right, it was major wounds on its stomach area, its stomach and chest. And so there was this sudden moment of, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have a Manticore. We're level 1. How are we going to get out of this? Like, it was actually a pretty tense moment. And for some reason, I didn't anticipate it being tense. It's kind of strange. I was just kind of figuring out if they do get in a fight, what's going to happen? What can I pull back? You know, those kinds of things. I didn't want to kill everybody, you know, day 1 of the adventure. But actually it was really, really good because they did negotiate with this thing. The paladin stepped forward, as well as I want to call it a thief, only because her picture looked like a thief, but the monk. And they there was some banter back and forth, and they agreed to heal the Manticore with their own powers. And the Manticore, you know, lawful evil, I think, you know, it has ways to communicate, and was very skeptical about it, but made them put down their weapons, which was a little iffy for them, I think, to approach this Manticore now unarmed. And they laid hands, and even, I think, I can't remember the name of this race, But one of the players walked up and did medicine checks and tried to bandage up the Manticore. So he would not let the prisoner go. I think at one point they were trying to negotiate. Look, we'll take her back to the mill, her house. She'll get healing potions and come back. And he was like, no, she's staying where she's at. She is my prisoner because I need healing. All right. So they didn't go that route. So they actually healed it, and they attempted through charisma checks and different things, persuasion checks, to see if maybe they could coax this Manticore to be on their side, to ally with this Manticore to take on the dragon later. Now, the Manticore was intrigued, but not quite interested, aligning himself with random folk who just walked into his cavern. So there was a big no temporarily from that. But the paladin actually came up with a pretty good idea, tried to deal with this Manticore, saying, look, hey, we'll go back to town and we'll tell the people there that we killed the Manticore. So the Manticore is no longer here, so they will stop hunting you. There was another little perk. So that was in the back of the mind of the Manticore. And so the Manticore agreed to these terms, that they would take the girl back, he would be healed, and they would go back to Fandolin and say that he was dead. So they'd stop messing with him, right? And so the Manticore took his claws, scraped the side of the cavern, which was stone, and broke one of his claws off and kind of pushed it across the floor towards the paladin and said, take this back to Fandolin for proof. And they slowly backed out of the cavern and are on their way now back to Fandolin. So you can see, out of all three cards, we went in one location, and in 4 hours, that's what we did. We only went to Umbrage Hill. And I'm actually going to go ahead and level them up. I think the book talks about they have to do 2 quests and they can level up. But because of the encounter at the very beginning and a lot of the role play that happened there in Fandolin and this pretty clever way of dealing with Manticore, I think definitely qualified them to raise their level to level 2. So guys, that's where we're at. That's what happened that night. And those are some of the tweaks and things I changed. I will do a chapters tip video sooner or later. But now we're going to play this Friday, and there's still some remaining quests on the board to do. I'm trying to debate, do I want to do them all? Or do I want to just do one more and close down the rest? I don't know. That's still kind of up in the air. I'm still thinking about that. But we had a good time, 4 hours of play, and it was pretty exciting. Definitely different feeling from Tyranny of Dragons. But I think so far, I'm actually playing with 4 people instead of 5, so it's a different dynamic happening at the table. But a lot of fun, guys. I think it remains to be seen where this goes and how it's going to feel long term, because it is very loosey-goosey. It is very MMO-ish. It is very go here, do that. Almost like, I dare say, fetch questing. So we're going to see how this goes. All right? But anyway, guys, that's all I got for you. And we play again this Friday, so more campaign diaries and chapter tips to come. All right, guys. See you in the next one.